One Piece chapter 1113 was a doozy. I have a lot of thoughts, but I also just finished reading the chapter, so these are initial thoughts. So even though I don't typically do 2 videos on a single chapter, I might do for this one. We'll see. I'm sure a lot of people who are better theorizers than me are going to do a lot of work over this break week. But I have some thoughts. I have a lot of thoughts. So I'll give you some of them here, and then we'll just kind of see where we go from there. But first, I don't typically talk about cover pages when I do my chapter reviews. I just want to mention that this cover page is extraordinary. It's one of my favorites. I love it so much. So we see what Marcus was looking up at in the last chapter, and most of the fandom guessed it. I feel like this was the biggest fan theory that was out there, and it was Vegapunk's brain. And I would like to issue an official complaint right here at the beginning of the video. Oda, I was promised a giant brain in a vat, and instead I got flesh and hair. And I would just like to say I was not anticipating the top of someone's head in a vat, and it's icky. I think it looks gross. I was mentally prepared for a brain. I was not mentally prepared for floating hair and skin. So that's all. I don't expect you to do anything about it. I just would like my complaint to be noted. Is this you, Vegapunk? What is death exactly? Where do your ideas truly reside? This has been an arc where free will, I think, has been a really big factor of the story. I really want to do a reread of Egghead and kind of try to nail down the key themes that Oda seems to be touching on over and over again. But free will and the what is life? At what point does a machine or a created being, do they become their own person independent of thought or independent of control? It's their own selves, their own instinct that's ruling them. We saw that at the beginning with Lilith and the mechanical sea beast that she was trying to control. We saw that with the Seraphim. We see that with the satellites becoming independent of the will of the Stella. We even brought up clones in this arc. So there's been a lot of identity, free will, instinct, and what overrides, even as far as overriding, controls and demands. We even have kind of a play on that with the Seraphim, who's controlling them at the moment, who's in control of them, and can they even break free from that control? So we've had a lot of that, and I do like now what is death. Now that Vegapunk has been flatlining for chapters, because we have a time limit on Vegapunk's message, we also know how many minutes he's been flatlining for. And the question being asked by Marcus is, what is death exactly? Where do our ideas truly reside? And this question reminds me of the question, when does a man truly die? And I like that kind of tie-in, or rather inversion of a man doesn't die until he's forgotten. And then in the case of Vegapunk, a man doesn't die until he forgets. His memories, his mind, his brain is still active despite his heart and his body being gone. So is Vegapunk truly alive still, because all of this that he's left behind, that he's kept active in its own way? I just kind of like that, playing with those same themes that are familiar to us, but from another perspective. I also love in Vegapunk's message, it says, "This video will one day connect the entire world. It will mean knowing and the discomfort of being known." And again, this connects back to the fact that Vegapunk has been trying to connect all of his thoughts, all of his memories, all of his inventions. He's been trying to upload all of that to one database, and at one point in Egghead, he even brought up the idea of his version of the World Wide Web. What if everyone could just upload their knowledge to this broader brain that everyone has access to? And Jinbei, I think it was, brought up, well, what about misinformation? And Vegapunk's like, no one will abuse that. And while he didn't create that thing, it was a very doe-eyed look at things, but while he didn't create that thing, he is now trying to connect everybody in this way. And obviously connection, the world having resources, having energy, being able to function without harm because he sees that as a possibility with scientific advancement. That's his dream, but connection seems to be a really big motivator for him as well. Anyway, we get a flash to see everybody who is preparing to listen to this message. Sort Village is scrambling and not doing their best at figuring out how to make this work, but we do get to see Kaya, and she's looking so strong. She's looking so healthy. She looks amazing. It really seems like she's doing a lot better than the last time we saw her. The vegetable boys have grown up. They're looking older. They're looking happy. It's lovely to see them. We get to see Crocus and Laboon. And we also check in with the different islands that the Straw Hats visited when they were in their training period. I remember there being speculation that when Vegapunk finishes his message, that the camera would then turn on wherever Vegapunk's body is. The antenna would have the cameras tuned in to him, therefore see that he's dead for sure, but also see what's around him, which could potentially be the elders in their yokai form, as well as Luffy in his sun god form. And I really, really like that theory, especially now that we're checking in with all these places that have tie-ins specifically with the Straw Hats, that potentially they'll see their Straw Hat and they'll be connected to it, and they'll see their Straw Hat fighting for the world. So it could be Vegapunk actually showing, all right, here's reality. Here's what things actually look like. These are the people above us. These are the people ruling our world. And these are the people that have supposedly kidnapped me. Now, granted, Vegapunk recorded this message before he got kidnapped, but he also may have had inklings that Luffy was the sun god, much like Kuma did, because he also heard the prophecies, because Kuma shared it with everyone. And it's possible that he considered that the world might like to see his corpse, his mangled, dead corpse, and the sun god fighting for the people. Anyway, after we flash in seeing a bunch of different people celebrating, saying, yay, we're about to see the message. What exactly is the message? We get to see some places that I don't recognize. Like, I don't understand this one in the corner here. Maybe that's just some nomads, just illustrating that the whole wide world, even the places we haven't visited, are a part of this. Or maybe, you know, that might be someone that we're gonna get a reveal for later. But all of the elders are communicating with each other telepathically, trying to figure out, do we destroy the lab? No, we can't destroy the lab because the Mother Flame, we need to be able to use this information to produce the Mother Flame. The Mother Flame is more important to them than the world gaining this information. They need to have this weapon more than they need to keep the world in the dark for what they're about to learn. So they're trying to figure out, what do we need to do? How can we stop this? Okay, we can't stop this, so what do we do next? What's gonna be our priority here? And they made a point to point out that York claimed that he carried on Ohara's research, which means that probably the Void Century is likely tied to this information that the world is sinking, that the poneglyphs might have information about this, that Roger likely, possibly, maybe knew about this. Anyway, Sanji steps in and lands a kick on one of the elders. I love the way this is done, how he's so far away. We can kind of see the lines of him running in at top speed, jumping up. We see that he bounced off the sword and then kicked the elder in the jaw. Oh, it looks so good. And I love too that it illustrates Sanji's special skill, his special ability of being so fast and being so tough. And even though then the elder immediately chomps down on Sanji, oh my goodness, it's horrifying. The sound effect is crack, cruck. So we can assume that Sanji is badly injured here. Vegapunk's body has been thrown, and Atlas came and scooped him up, didn't let him hit the ground, even though, you know, he is flatlining. But Bonnie gigantifies herself. Now, I love this too, because first of all, I love that Bonnie is around giants now, and so she can imagine being a giant, right? Like, the giants are right there next to her. So I like to think that that's what gave her the motivation or the thought to, okay, I'm gonna be giant then. And just overall, this whole sequence, I'm gonna love seeing this in the anime. This whole sequence of Sanji coming out of nowhere, rushing in to speed up, jump off the sword, kick the elder in the jaw. Ethan Venus, I don't know why I'm not using his name. The skeletal horse kicks him in the jaw, then he switches out of his hybrid form into his full yokai form. Sort of, his arms are still out. Snaps closed his jaw on Sanji. The two giants come in and restrain him, and then Bonnie turns herself into a giant to stomp him. This whole sequence is so good. I love it so much. Anyway, we get more reactions. I enjoy Caesar's reaction because he wants to become the greatest scientist organically, not by default, and he's mad that Vegapunk is dead. He's mad to learn that Vegapunk is dead because of what it means for him, which is really funny. In the same vein, Morgans is mad that this message is getting out to the world because of what it means for him. What are you doing? I can't break the news if you're just gonna give it to them for free. I can't commodify, make a profit off of, gain fame off of this incredible news if you're just gonna hand it out. Stop that. I would like to be in control of the news cycle, please. I'm also still waiting on some of the other reactions that we didn't get in this chapter. I would love to see some of the reactions of specifically Shanks, Rayleigh. We saw Crocus, but he just kind of was sitting there, which is very Crocus. But anyway, there are other significant worldwide members that I'm looking forward to seeing their reactions eventually to how things are going. And I'm also very curious to see how people perceive Luffy, since the news cycle is saying that Luffy captured Vegapunk, and some of them have echoed that back in this chapter, so that news has gotten out to the world. So how many of them say, no, Luffy wouldn't do that, and how many of them believe Luffy to be the villain after this? Excited to see that. But anyway, Vegapunk's not wanting to moralize things at this point. I want to make one thing very clear first. Whoever may have rendered their judgment unto me, I am not trying to convince you that their intent is evil. I will not apply the labels of good and evil at all, in fact, because I understand too little about him to begin with. So who's him? Is it going to be Saturn? Is it any of the elders? Is it Emu? Is it Kizaru, who is the one who actually killed Vegapunk? Is he just trying to not think for the world and let them decide for themselves who they side with, where they land with all of this if he is going to turn the cameras on his body? Is he just letting them say, okay, now look at the scene, look at what you see, you decide. Is he bad? Is he good? The one who harmed me, what do you decide? Or it could be because Vegapunk too has done a lot of harm in this world. He too has done a lot to work with the world government, and he's harmed people. He's been a part of the harming of people like Kuma. And he seems to regret that deeply now. But at the same time, it could be a position of a lot of us have done a lot of harm. So I'm not going to be the one to pass judgment on anyone at this point in my life. It could be one of those kinds of situations. I hold too many sins myself to throw a stone at someone else. Maybe. Anyway, Saturn comes rushing in on Robin and Usopp and Nami and Chopper and Brook, and he sees Robin, says her name. She immediately remembers Ohara. Saturn was there at Ohara. So he says her name, targets in on her. Nami sees what's going on, she understands what's happening, and immediately grabs a hold of Robin to get her out of the way, and they all jump into defending her. And this is what my artist Ticine depicted this week for her art piece. Nami grabbing Robin, pulling her out of the way, Chopper puffing himself up and taking a hit by one of the claws, which Ticine depicted as a poisonous claw, because we already know that these are poisonous claws, but she just made it super clear. Chopper looks amazing, by the way, in Ticine's rendition. Look at how fierce his face looks. Usopp jumping into action with his slingshot. Brook chopping off one of Saturn's legs. And I also love the outline of Saturn's shadow on the ground. I love this scene so much. I'm so proud of our crew that they don't hesitate for a second. A lot of these crew members are known as some of the weaker crew members, some of the more scared crew members, but when Robin is in danger, they don't hesitate. When Robin is potentially about to be targeted, there's not a second that they waste. Immediately, they face off against an immortal, gigantic creature. It's honestly such a moving panel, and I love it so much. Anyway, back to Vegapunk's message. What I'm about to tell you is so preposterous that you might even burst into laughter. Reference to Roger? I don't know. However, you have the right to know. To make a long story short, the world as we know it will sink into the sea. The world is sinking, and there have been clues everywhere. Water 7 was not an isolated incident. The Long Ring, Long Land, Water 7, that whole ecosystem where you saw it all connecting was not its own little thing. Wano having to build up on top of itself as well, not its own isolated thing. And now my brain is spinning to each island trying to connect. Okay, what was the evidence on each island that it was sinking? And I have a couple of, there's a few things. Actually, there's a few things that my patrons pointed out too. One of which being that Impel Down was potentially built on land, and then it just got covered by water over time, and they were like, well, that makes it pretty secure. Sure, why not? Let's leave it, instead of trying to build it back up again. But then we also have evidence through Roger's crew that Roger potentially knew about this as a part of their discovery, maybe what they read on the poneglyphs, part of their discovery was that the world was sinking. We have evidence in that Rayleigh became a ship coder, and so he's learning ways to survive underwater. There's the fact that Crocus built a submarine in Laboon. Now, granted, there was practical purposes for that, in that he needed to be able to help Laboon, but also maybe help himself. Shanks doesn't have any devil fruit users on his crew, but then I was also thinking about the fact that if all the islands end up becoming one landmass under the sea, then it essentially becomes One Piece, and maybe that's part of what the One Piece is that knowledge, that evidence of what's to come, though I don't know why Roger would laugh at that. There's the fact that the all blue, where all the seas meet, that would be when it all sinks down under the sea. Then there's the irony of the fishmen, how they aren't allowed to be on land because they're considered a lesser race, but in fact, humanity is sinking below the sea as well, and if that were to happen, then they would probably need a lot of assistance from the fishmen, so that would potentially put the fishmen in a higher hierarchy than a lot of humanity is. And then you have to think about the Noah, and I love the subversion of the Noah visually looking like Noah's Ark, and a lot of the language around it also, harkens to that. Instead of it being a great flood, instead in One Piece it's a great sinking. Honestly, there's just so many things. There's so many things that I don't know if Oda pre-planned all of it. Like, he might have known so long ago that everything was sinking, and he's just been leaving little hints here and there. Or it might just be, Oda pulling it off and just being like, you know what I could do? And just finding ways that it all connected. I think he must have known. I think he must have had at least some vague idea that this is where it was all heading. And it also has me thinking about Lulisha and how the way that that Imu tested the Mother Flame was by creating this hole, this crater that all the water was flooding into, and that raised the tides. So is the world sinking because of incidences like this and the intervention of Imu, the ways that Imu is moving, the way he's destroying things, is causing the demise of the greater world at large? And what Vegapunk, the second half of the message, because I doubt Vegapunk is done talking in this chapter. I think he probably will have more to say in the next chapter. What Vegapunk is going to explain to everyone is the world is sinking. The world as we know it will sink into the sea because of what Imu has been doing, crossing things out, destroying them, causing the levels to rise. Like, is it that? I have many thoughts. As I said, I just finished reading this chapter, set up the camera, started having a chat with you, so I have a lot of thoughts, and I haven't fully, there's some chapters that I want to reread, there's some things that I want to look into, and then maybe, but I would love to hear your thoughts. So let's talk about this some more. We're on break, sadly, which means that we have a lot of time to speculate wildly. So I would love to hear what you think. What do you think is going on here? What's the Iron Giant up to? We haven't checked in with him in quite some time. Where's Zoro again? And I also wonder what Robin is going to do next. It's clear that the reason Robin needed to be knocked out for the last several chapters is because she has too much information. She would have identified Saturn's voice too soon for what Oda wanted to do with the story, so he had to get her out of the way. So now that she's awake, is she gonna fight a giant spider again? Because that would be really cool. And is there more to this message? Because I really think there is. Especially because at the beginning of this message, he said, I have committed to, not at the beginning of this message, at the beginning of this, what he says in this chapter, he says, I have committed 2 sins. Therefore, whether I am arrested or executed, I shall program this message to be broadcast when my heart stops beating. So I think he has more to say. We'll see. I would love to hear your thoughts, though. Please do chat with me more in the comments. I have a lot of processing to do. I'll see you again soon. Bye.